All right, thanks again for coming out, you guys. I think we'll get started here. My name is Stephen Mace. I'm the center director here at ESAC. Yeah, thanks again for coming out, you guys. Super excited to have you. Tonight's topic is strategies for creating useful field observations. So one of the very important products we have on the website is a list of recent field obs. It's one of the most helpful ways that you can contribute to the Avalanche centers by providing your information that you gather in the field. So I'm going to offer a few ideas and tips and tricks to make the most out of your efforts. So why should you read the observations? Why are they important? Well, I think it's important to keep in mind that the forecast that we create every day paints with a really broad brush. So we are offering one danger rating and a kind of a general view on what the conditions are like across the entire forecast area, which for those of you who spend a lot of time here know that it can often be very different from one end to the other, from Bishop Creek up to Virginia Lakes or in Mammoth in June. And we have to kind of try to encompass all of those things in a very kind of concise package. And observations from specific areas can offer you a lot more detail on specific places you want to visit or recent conditions in the places you want to go. So they can be really useful for you as a user in that way. They also really help us create a more complete picture of what's going on out there. They give us, the forecasters, a really good idea of what people are seeing, and all those pieces of information really help us out. But I think more than anything, it kind of puts that magnifying glass versus that kind of 10,000 foot view. And it can kind of turn in a picture like this into something a little more useful like this, where, from afar, you might not see all these avalanche crowns, but there are actually quite a few visible from that location. And you look a little closer and through some binoculars, right? So why should you post your observations? Well, I guess I'd put the question back, why not? We are operating in a world of constantly wanting more information. We are constantly looking for more data. You should hear our conversations behind the scenes. We just wish we had 1 million wind gauges and all the observations in the world. And it really does come down to the strength and weight of the data. The more observations we get, the more certainty we have, the more confidence we have in creating the forecast, which makes it more accurate and more useful. So this is my plea for you to post your obs when you're out in the field or when you get back from the field. And it really is an invaluable way to pay or to support the center. We can't operate without your financial support, but your observations are equally as important to the product. And for those of you who need more motivation, you do get $10 of in-store credit when you add together the $5 you get at Mammoth Mountaineering, $5 at Sage to Summit Bishop. So I don't know anywhere else in the country that has an incentive like that for public observation. So we're super lucky to have the generous support from those stores. So if you've posted obs this season and haven't known that deal exists, just know you have credit waiting for you, and please use it. And yeah, whatever your heart desires in those stores. There's plenty of things, good fun things to pick from. But yeah, post your obs. So how do you do it? Well, you go to the website. Here on the home page, there's kind of 3 ways to get in there. I've pointed at all of them with the arrows. The orange arrows, or the orange one down here, that's where you go to look at recent obs. Blue one, you can submit one right off the front page. And if you go to that top bar there, you get some more options. You can again view them and you can post them. And what's nifty about our ops page is you can actually sort them by relevance to what you're looking for. So if you go up here to where it says Mammoth Lakes, and you hit that drop down, you get some options of different drainages from north end to the south end of the range. So if you're interested in obs strictly from June Lake, because that's where you're going out, you can pull up the recent obs from June. If you really are mostly wanting to look at avalanche obs, you can hit on signs of instability here, or sorry, avalanches over here, yes or no. Maybe you're more interested in all the signs of instability. You can mix and match all of these different things. Or if you want to look back at observations from past seasons, you can go into the archive over here on the left. So quite a useful tool. Yeah, take advantage. So when you're posting your ob, I want to, I guess, first say that we speak English and we speak bro and we speak skier before we learn to speak science. So if you're nervous about using the proper language or having all the details correct, don't be. We can understand it all, and most people can. So don't let that stop you. But when you're posting, there are some pieces of information that are really kind of, I guess you could put them in a hierarchy. And one of them is it a timely piece of information? And what I mean by that is it still relevant? The snow changes consistently and constantly. And when we post obs, 3-4 days later, it might not be as relevant as it was that day, right? And I get it. I come home tired from skiing too, and don't necessarily always want to write it off. So it does take time, but we are super grateful. And then I like to ask myself, like, what would I want to know if I was going to go to this place tomorrow? And that's sort of where I start. Is like, if my friend called and was like, Steve, I heard you went to this place today. What'd you find? What'd you think? How was it? I'm gonna like find a list of bullet points of, in relevance, order of relevance of what I want to know, and I'm gonna start there. And then I also like to think of like, what surprised me today? Did I see any avalanches when I didn't expect to? Or maybe, man, I expected it to be bulletproof windboard and it was actually really good. Soft snow. Like, that's all relevant information. When in doubt, these 5 red flags are great things to report. If you see recent avalanche activity, you see those signs of instability, such as collapsing, cracking, or wumping in the snowpack. It's snowing super hard. The snow is blowing around. I know when I left my house yesterday evening, it was a full whiteout on the road in town in Mammoth. That was very useful information. Or is it rapidly warming? Those 5 red flags are huge. And then it's always useful to share non-avalanche related hazards. I can say as a user of the product, I really like to know about struggles with access or the coverage or lack thereof on drought years. In general, surface conditions are always useful for people. And you can actually gain a lot about the relative stability or instability from those same observations. And if we wanted to boil even deeper, I think, if you're taking focused obs, these are some of the details that really matter, right? We want the location, the aspect, and the elevation, and a terrain description. Now that location doesn't need to be like slope scale specific, as long as it's pretty, as long as it's specific enough to be useful, right? So maybe drainage specific or a general area can also be helpful. If you're looking for resources to get a little more of your nerd on, and the SWAG, the Snow, Weather, and Avalanche Guidelines, is kind of the gold standard in the industry. Great resource if you don't already have one. It's full of a lot of information that you may never use, but it's full of lots of great nuggets as well. Snow Pilot, it's a free resource online. You can create an account and create snow profiles in a digital format and an image format. So if you're looking to take those notes and put it into a picture, that's a great resource to use. Maps and guidebooks are always helpful. If you're looking for place names or you want to just, show an image of where you were on a map, that can be really helpful. Caltopo is a good one for online use. But yeah, when in doubt, use plain English. Photos, videos, all super helpful. It is important that we share evidence and direct observations rather than just our assumptions of what we're seeing. I think some speculation is okay, although we should try to avoid it. Instead, I want to report, when I write an observation, I'm trying to describe what I saw specifically in the day in the field. I'm not trying to like think about what's happening in the future. I still struggle with that sometimes, but that's the goal. And when I do try to make those or have those opinions or thoughts for the future, I'm not afraid to share my uncertainty level, right? Or even if I'm not sure what I'm looking at, it can be really helpful to describe that uncertainty, right? Like, I just saw this weird thing, here's a photo of it. I don't actually know what that means. Like, that's totally fine. Photos and videos are awesome. you can gain a lot from images and videos. And I think it can't really be overstated how helpful they can be. You know, you can fill the text box with a very brief sentence or a simple hello or something and put in some photos, and it can be really useful. And this kind of illustrates my point here. So I'm not sure if the volume might not work, but we're going to try. This video is going to describe what I'm seeing and have documented in this pit. So I'll take some time and look at that. I don't know if you're not familiar with how to read these. Basically, the further left that this purple bar goes, the more stiff the snow is. And when we see an upside down relationship, so we have stiffer snow on top of softer, weaker snow, that's generally not a good thing for stability. We want the stiffer, harder snow underneath the softer, less dense snow. Oh, it's not going to work. Well, basically, I'm describing that we have. So I'm telling you where we are. We're on the northeast aspect of 10,400 feet in the Lakes Basin. And we have a relatively right side up snowpack with soft snow up high, about fist hard. We got a windboard layer here, really stiff, about pencil hard. And that's on top of slightly softer, but still relatively stiff snow below. And then underneath that snow, it's really soft, sugary, weak, faceted snow. This is a snow pit test called a propagation saw test. And so this was a persistent slab problem we were describing, and that was highlighting that we have this condensing dense layer on top of like a weak, soft base. And so I guess my point with this is just that you can look at these all day, but when you see the video and you see that piece of snow release after the saw cut, it kind of hits in a different way, right? Kind of makes it a little more real. So please send your media. It's super helpful. I will say, especially for you iPhone users in the crowd, that our website does not like the HNEIC or whatever the file type is. It does prefer JPEGs or PNGs. So I found out that you can change that in the phone. So if you don't care, that might be smart. But if your photos aren't loading, that's probably the reason why. Avalanches and close calls, these are really, 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 really important pieces of data for us. So I would highly recommend and ask for you guys to report them if you see them, if you trigger one, if you're involved in an avalanche. All that's super, super helpful for us. It's probably the most important data point you could offer. And it's also probably one of the hardest ones to offer because there's a lot of stigma and maybe guilt or embarrassment involved when you trigger an avalanche or if you have a close call. And having been involved in many myself, I can attest it can be hard to share. But I would just say that all observations that are submitted publicly are, they're kept anonymous. So your name will not be attached to any obby post. You can always ask us to keep it private so that it's not posted publicly at all. But the information still comes to the forecasters. And you can always email us directly, forecasters@esavalanche.org. That's how you get in touch with us. And you can send us any obs that way. We don't really care how you send them to us, as long as you do. I will actually, on that note, also say that if you don't put your contact information into the ob, then we can't give you store credit. But just because you put your contact information in the ob doesn't mean it's shared with anyone else. So don't think that by leaving that blank, it's keeping it out. It's already not going to go in there. But if you want the credit, you got to put it in, at least your email. But with avalanches, especially if there's a human involvement or an injury or even a fatality, like we really want to do an investigation of that avalanche. So it's really helpful for us to know when and where they happen. And frankly, it's one of the best learning outcomes that we as public users and backcountry skiers have to use. This activity has a really sharp and painful learning curve, and getting caught in an avalanche and surviving or being uninjured is really lucky. And it's a great example. It's a great opportunity to share that with others so that they can learn to help avoid getting caught in an avalanche themselves, because sometimes people aren't that lucky. Probably the most popular reason not to post your obs. I don't want to blow up my stash. And I get it. If you've been following us here at ESAC for a long time, I think you may have noticed this season we're trying to be a lot more vague about our locations when we're in the field. And it isn't but this is kind of the reason. We're trying to be more drainage specific and less slope scale specific. And you can always do that yourself. So it's still useful for me to know that you were in the Lundy drainage and you're at 10,000 feet on the northeast aspect, even if you don't tell me you're on Gilcrest or something else, right? So I don't need to know what peak you're on, but oftentimes that other location data, the elevation and aspect, can be super helpful. And then again, you can always make your observations private, so they're viewable only by the forecasters, or you can always send it to us via email. You can tag us on Instagram. That's all great too. Yeah, so don't let that stop you from sharing information that you think might be critical to the forecast. But I do get it, and I sympathize. And then, yeah, when in doubt, keep it simple. You don't know the jargon, that's fine. We speak English pretty well most of the time. And really the only bad observation is the one you didn't make. So please send your obs. That's kind of what I got for now on the obs game. You guys have any questions before we go into the season history? State of the snowpack?
Do you have any particularly memorable observations you've received over the years?
What a great question. So the question for the people in Zoomland was some great observations we've received over the years. I assume you're looking for something funny.
Whatever you got, man.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things. We do review public obs before we post them to the website. It's a very high bar to get blocked or have an ob denied. Most of the time, if it has any relevance to current conditions, it's going to go up. Unless there's something glaringly wrong with an observation, in which case I'm probably going to email you and be like, hey man, this avalanche you reported as a size 4 is actually a size 1, and I know that because I stood there today. I'm going to change that. Is that okay with you? That might be what the strategy to attack something like that. But no, I mean, I think we've had some interesting obs over the years, and sometimes they're not really describing current conditions, but they're actually describing interactions with people, or a venting of feelings and opinions that don't really have any relevance on the snowpack. So those are things that are an example of something we might not forward to the page. Yeah. Any other questions out there? Any questions in the chat?
No, not so far.
Great. Okay, we got a lively crowd. Well, probably what you're all really here for. How's the season been so far? Sounds like it's been good. Well, I think it's been a pretty great season so far. For us, it really started off in November. We got enough snow in that first week of November to issue our first kind of general avalanche advisory. I was on my way back from the Grand Canyon and rode it in Flagstaff, Arizona. But it was enough snow to start skiing right off the bat. We actually had a decent amount of lower elevation snow, which doesn't always happen that early. We had a couple of weeks of high pressure in the middle of the month, and we did see that generally shallow snowpack start to weaken and facet a bit. And mostly we were focused on talking about shallow coverage and dodging obstacles like falling trees or rocks. But it was enough to get out there and start skiing, which is pretty awesome. At the end of the month in November, we got a pretty big round of snow, end of November, early December. And that really kicked things off for us. And we issued our first daily avalanche advisory on December 3rd. which happened to coincide with high danger. We issued an avalanche warning, and it was our season kickoff event. So it was quite a busy first week of work. But it was really awesome to have enough coverage to get after it that early in the year. And it really didn't slow down too much in December. We did have a little bit of dry spell in the middle of the month again, but then that really teed us up for the end of the month, Christmas into New Year's, where we had these back-to-back atmospheric rivers line up off the west coast. This is Mammoth right here. This is Asia and Indonesia over here. And this is what it looked like at Christmas time. Just one after another, atmospheric rivers coming in hot. And that brought us into January, which it didn't seem to stop snowing until almost the end of the month, which was super awesome. But it was definitely pretty intense for those of you who were here at the time. I know in my house, the snowbanks got high enough that the rotary plows couldn't get snow on top of them anymore. So it was more just shooting it into the side of the wall, which was an interesting strategy. But we did see some really interesting events as a result. So anytime we have these really short duration, high intensity snow events, we see some pretty extreme impacts. And that's not, avalanche activity isn't exempt from that. We also had some pretty warm events where we had some fluctuating rain lines and rain lines that were a little higher in elevation. This was an interesting avalanche local here at June Lake. This is under J1 here. And this was explosive triggered by patrol a couple days after a rainstorm where it rained up to the chalet. And this is actually 2 avalanches. I don't know if you guys had the opportunity to fly over this on the lift, but this one here under the lift line here ran all the way down to the conference center, which is pretty cool to see. Ran really far, gouged into the earth. There's some dirt involved, broken trees. This one here was a size 3 avalanche, quite a bit more snow. But there was a mid-slope bench here that stopped a lot of the debris, but the debris there was about 3.5 meters deep. This is the crown here. That's me, for an idea of how tall it was, about 175 centimeters or so. Ran all the way to the ground. But this was one of those that it got a lot of rain on this slope over the New Year's holiday, and then a couple days later after that rain, it turned to snow. Saw big avalanches. Really cool to see. This is one of the more unique avalanches I think I've ever seen. And there's actually a really cool photo because there's quite a few different avalanches that you can see in this photo. But here we have 2 avalanches that ran in the same path at 2 different times. One was warm and wet, and one was dry and cold. Give you a good idea of what the 2 debris fans look like. Wet debris is, I don't know, I think it's pretty fun to look at because it, I don't know, looks kind of neat. Acts like water, very unique. This is likely a mixed avalanche that broke as a dry avalanche up here, crossed the rain line, and came out as wet debris. And this is what that debris did outside of the last frame, which is super unique. I've never seen snow do this. We're kept the same width, about a vehicle to 2 vehicles wide. It actually turned and went uphill for a second. Pretty wild. It reminded me of those Play-Doh machines that have like the plunger that spits out the Play-Doh in whatever shape you put in there. Anyway, it's pretty neat. We also had an avalanche in the Aspendale area down near Bishop. This was another size 3. This one was a wind slap that broke down into the deep, persistent, weak layers, about 2 meters deep, the whole crown. This Jawbone Canyon here is a Google Earth image, probably getting cross-loaded from right side to left here, broke down to the ground, and it actually damaged 3 homes down here at the bottom of the path. That likely occurred on the same day as the funny snake on the E. And then it kind of dried up for the end of January, and we came into February. And so far, we haven't seen the same precip numbers here in February, although we do have more coming this week. And what we have seen instead is relatively cold temperatures. I'd say this winter has been colder than the average. We've had some dry periods. And so we've seen that faceting happening in the surface of the snowpack. And we've seen quite a few interesting results from that process with light snowfalls and strong winds. This avalanche here on the left, this was an avalanche skier triggered on Mount Tom in Elderberry Canyon. Wind pressed snow, likely on some weak facets, quite far down from the ridge. This one is from Pine Creek. You can see it's stepped down into deeper layers here, a good sign of kind of persistent rain involvement. And that's really kind of where our head's at right now. Is we've been tracking on this complex structure in the upper snowpack. We've been seeing these signs that are cluing us into, things running a little bigger or more strangely than we're used to. This is an avalanche that occurred during the evening, 13th, 14th?
Yeah.
Yeah, 13th, 14th. And we saw, I think, 4 or 5 inches of snow with really strong winds from the southwest that then shifted and blew from the north, even stronger. And what's interesting is the snow was timed more with the north winds than the southwest winds. And this is a catchment zone from the southwest winds. So the winds are probably what loaded this slope and broke that more than the new snow. But for that little snow, for it to see such a wide breaking crown is a little surprising. Oh, this one down here is interesting because these blocks are about 2.5 feet deep and maybe 4 to 5 feet wide. So we started seeing a lot of hard slab activity from really, weather events that aren't that unusual for us, which being the extreme winds and sort of light snowfalls. So that's really been kind of top of mind for us on the forecast team. And this is kind of what we're attributing it to, is that we have this complex structure in the upper snowpack where we have these faceted grains, variety of windboards or temperature crusts, and then some newer snow that's getting stiffened by the wind. So we're seeing structures like this in the upper snowpack in a lot of places. And while we've had the weak layer and we've had the start of a stiffer layer above, we haven't really seen that slab develop everywhere. It's mostly where the wind has been putting the snow. This is a picture of those facets, so pretty well developed, even in the upper snowpack. So as we move into the next few days, we're really watching to see how much snow we get, and if we start to see this persistent slab problem really take hold moving forward. Yeah, so that's kind of the beginning of where we're at, looking forward from here. This is where we're at in terms of water on the Eastern Sierra. This is our water year. I think I took this image yesterday. So doing pretty well. This is the 18-19 in the gold bar. This is 16-17 here in the green. So we're on pretty good track. This black is our average here that we never actually seem to have. And a couple drought years at the bottom there for reference. Yeah, I'd say we're doing pretty good. I think if the tap turned off tomorrow, we'd still be looking pretty good in terms of our water, which is awesome. And then looking into the next couple weeks, we have temperatures staying below average and precip above average. So we're pretty psyched. Winter's returning. We've got some incoming snow Friday, Saturday, and then another round next week that looks even bigger. So, and then beyond that, only time will tell. And I think the biggest question for me is, are we going to see more of these high intensity, short duration storms that shut town down and make it impossible to go anywhere, get to the trailhead? Or are we going to see more of these small, fluffy, 2 feet in a day instead of 2 hours kind of storms? That's my hope and dream. That's all I got for you.